Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of the Brutal Truth About Sales and Selling podcast. The world has changed a lot recently, certainly in the last 5 years or so. It used to be that if you were a great salesperson, it didn't really matter so much what industry you came from, what company you came from. If you had a great reputation, that was done by word of mouth. But lately, I'd say probably in the last 5 years, your personal brand. Now, what does this mean? This means how you're seen wherever it is your hiring manager, your customers look. Most likely it's on the internet today. Maybe your industry isn't there yet. Maybe it's on Facebook. Maybe it's on Twitter. Maybe it's on LinkedIn, YouTube. That's up for each of us to find out. I mean, I had to go through an exploration when I started my own company. I tried what I had been doing forever, networking and cold calling and building relationships with people. And I had some luck with it. But then when I got onto YouTube at first, and then the podcast, and then LinkedIn, all of a sudden things blew up because people, oh, I know you. You're the guy that walks around talking about sales. Or, oh, yeah, you're the Brutal Truth guy. Or you're the Maverick Selling guy. And all of a sudden people knew me or knew or heard of me through things that I had done. Now, does this mean that each of us turns into a marketer? I don't think so. I think each of us needs to invest a few minutes a day, maybe an hour a week, building our own brand, building awareness about us. Because the days of us being this generalist, this independent person that's not really required to be better at just sales. And I get it. If you're doing well right now, why should I start doing this? I think you should start doing it so people become aware of you. The length of time that companies exist as independent companies is shortening. The value of any rep, no matter how good, is dwindling. And if we want to keep our careers moving in an upward spiral instead of a downward spiral, because it really doesn't stay the same, we have to invest in this and be where our customers are and our hiring managers of people who want us to work for them. When your reputation precedes you, and it may be just your network, it may be old school face-to-face networking events. I don't know. That didn't really work that well in my business. There was a lot of users group stuff that was very effective. A couple of conferences, but those have really dwindled in the last few years because face-to-face time is super expensive. You have to travel. You have to stay overnight. You have to dedicate a lot of your personal time to it. So we're going to get into it in this interview today, and I hope you really make a little investment. I even have a free course on how to polish up your LinkedIn profile. You can find it at b2brevenue.com. Hit the training thing. It's free. I go through the profile, how to set it up right, what matters, how to get around the bugs within LinkedIn. I can't believe they still have these there, but it won't populate like your company's image. I show you how to get around that, what not to do, and I critique about 5 or 10 other users in there. It's completely free. Try it out, see if you like it. I might be building it up, but I really wanted to keep the premium content in the premium courses because that's the real focus of my time right now. But before we get into the interview, I want to make sure you're checking out Co-Video. Video email is the breakthrough approach. It's working. Everyone's got an excuse why they're not doing it. Let's get over it. Let's try it. Do a eval, play with it, and sign up for it. I'm telling you, video has tremendously affected my business. First on YouTube, now on LinkedIn, and it's really opened up because now people connect with a face, with your voice, with your personality, and you break through all that noise. Also, I got some interviews coming up from Nudge.ai. They've got some great stuff that's coming up, so look for that this weekend or next week. They've really eliminating all that data entry into the CRM. So look for those interviews. I'll sum up this interview and give you an update on what's going on with the courses and how you can crush it here in 2019. Here we go. Hey, Evan, welcome to the show. As a way of getting started, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a big fan, so thanks for having me on your show. I've been listening for at least a year or so. I'm a 48-year-old solopreneur. So I struck out of corporate America and escaped the rat race about 5 years ago to go independent and really never look back. So I'm a sort of social digital practitioner helping enterprise, B2B clients with social and digital and thought leadership, and as an influencer, sort of driving their engagement and visibility across the social media landscape.
And what was your impetus to go out on your own?
I worked for big companies, small companies, but finally I got really sick of frankly, the rat race, the political machinations of life in big corporate America. I worked for Oracle and Intel and other companies, and I guess freedom was the ultimate goal, both financial freedom, but freedom from reorgs and mergers and downsizing and politics. And it's been a great experience getting outside that.
And when did you start getting involved with social?
Well, I've been a personal obsessive with social for at least 8-10 years as sort of a hobby, as a side hustle, and really now as a quite a thriving business. So it's, the old adage, do what you love or turn your hobby into your career sort of worked out well for me.
Yeah. And what was did you start on Twitter or LinkedIn or?
As a sales guy, as a sales professional, biz dev guy, I was on LinkedIn early on and was really a networker on LinkedIn from the early days and started on Twitter about 10 years ago. Yeah. And now, of course, we have this whole landscape of other platforms, which I'm also active on. But that's sort of the time horizon. And, of course, we're all engaged for many, many hours a week now on these platforms. So it's kind of where our attention is.
That's it. I remember getting on LinkedIn in the early 2000s. I've been trimming my connections, and I have them back to like 2004. And I don't know about you. I'm running out of the 30,000 right now, so I'm kind of scrambling.
Yeah, well, I hit the 30,000 barrier, and of course now the only option is for people to follow me. So I do have about 60,000 quote unquote followers on LinkedIn. But these days I treat LinkedIn as a media platform. I publish there, I evangelize, I do video, I cover events on LinkedIn. I'm active in LinkedIn groups. So it's much more than, of course, a Rolodex now when we both started.
That's it. And all my colleagues were like, oh, be careful if you get on there, because if your manager sees you're on there, they know you're looking for a job.
Yeah, that's funny. It's funny how that and believe it or not, that mentality still exists. Yeah, especially in the industries we're in, the B2B industries that are quite resistant to change. But I think now people are really building their careers and businesses, and of course making their quotas around LinkedIn. Well, so it's become the premier destination for B2B sellers, of course.
And that's it, because I talk to CMOs all the time, and I try and convince them, or at least make them aware that, your website is no longer the primary hub. You're not going to get people to your website the way it used to be. You're going to get them on social.
Right. And, no one reads your effing blog, right? So I'm trying to be polite here, but they will read it when it's a LinkedIn post. Yeah. And so I really use it to drive traffic to my content and my clients' content, because they're seeing both the earned media value of LinkedIn and also the paid, the paid social side of LinkedIn is really compelling, albeit expensive.
It's very expensive, isn't it? Have you tried working with it much?
Yeah, I've done some experiments. I mean, I'm a big experimenter, so I'm always looking for me and also on behalf of my clients on what's working, what's not working. And, You got to try, as a practitioner, you have to try these platforms and try new tools and advertising products and apps, and you got to experiment as you're doing with podcasting. And there's too many people out there who are just reading headlines or making assumptions without getting hands-on and seeing what works. And that's sort of what I do with my own business and with clients, is I'm constantly trying new tools and techniques and tactics and tricks and hacks to see sort of what works for me and for them.
That said, I see too many people just taking a checklist approach. Do these 5 things on LinkedIn, and it's like, yeah, that'll get you something, but I think you have to really work it.
Yeah, and I find now I'm getting a tremendous lead stream from LinkedIn and connecting with people that I don't know. That was always a bit of a no-no. Oh, you have to have, a relationship, or you have to know them. Well, not really. If someone views your profile and agrees to connect, that sort of becomes a top of funnel opportunity. And through content and, over time, you can turn that into prospects. So there's lots of interesting tactics like that.
So what's your primary channel today? What do you spend most of your time on?
Twitter is great for the sort of water cooler conversations that exist out there, and participating in those, and trying to dominate, a half dozen different hashtags in which I'm active. And it's great for, news and live events. Every event now has a hashtag. And so even if you're not at the event, it's a great opportunity to participate in the conversations around an event. So day to day, it's Twitter, and then, LinkedIn is just, an adjacent to that, and Instagram, by the way, and Facebook groups. And so, and of course, we're seeing an explosion of niche sites, whether it's Quora or Reddit or other platforms that have amazing audiences now. So it's kind of all the above. You can't just pick or choose one platform. You have to go to where people are, and increasingly it's a dozen different platforms.
Yeah. And who is your ideal customer profile? Is it a marketing leader or COO?
Yeah, I typically sell to VP of marketing or CMO or a marketing lead, and increasingly some sales leaders. Sales people have been reluctant to sort of really engage on social media, but I think that's changing, and social selling now is becoming quite the rage. And so salespeople and sales leaders are realizing that their customers are on social, so they better be there as well.
Yeah, and the other, old school channels of the phone and email, the phone, you now have, everyone's got caller ID, everyone's got voicemail. Some people don't even have a desk phone anymore. Some companies don't even give out desk phones anymore. And email's pretty well protected now.
Yeah, and so what's left? Well, it's sort of last of the Mohicans here with sales tools. But I think what social does for me and others is sort of prime the call. So I'm not afraid of phone calls. I make phone calls. I use social to pitch meetings. I use DMs to get appointments. And so it's always a phone call at the end of the day that gets a sale. It's just social sort of clears the way. It opens the door. It establishes some connection, some relationship, and some context.
Yeah.
And so when that call comes, even if it's a cold call, but more often a conference call, then there's some context and some connection there. So that's really helpful.
Yeah, I'm not down on the phone. I only do scheduled calls.
Right. And I think the communication side of sales isn't going away. It's just been supplemented by digital and social.
And when you want to get into a new account, what approach do you take?
I think a lot of it is learning about their business, let's say, and looking for impending events. So if a startup, for example, has a funding event, it means tweeting or posting or blogging about that, mentioning them, tagging different executives. So all of a sudden you're sort of giving, right? You're creating some goodwill, some buzz with them or for them. that often generates attention, maybe follow backs, maybe replies. And so you're sort of establishing a relationship up front. And over time, you then sort of earn the right to reach out and pitch because you've been engaging with them, mentioning them, perhaps having sort of these online discussions with a prospect. And when the timing is right, you can then quite naturally have a call, and you have some history and background there. So there's a lot of sort of research, but then frankly just engagement, and you can get people's attention pretty easily now on LinkedIn and Twitter by tagging, by mentioning, by commenting, replying to posts, and engaging one-on-one with your prospects in a meaningful way.
Yeah. And what journey do you take your clients through when you do engage with them?
So typically it's talking about their business, understanding their business, asking questions, expressing genuine interest in what they're doing, and then sharing relevant bits of what I do that put it in context. If I've worked in areas like wireless or 5G or mobility, I can share some insights or tidbits that are relevant to them. I think the key for sales for me is context.
Yeah.
You have to put yourself in their context and look at the world through their eyes and show you understand the landscape, not just them and their business. And so that's what sort of my sales approach is, trying to build some meaningful connection there and establish that context before I pitch myself per se.
And your business, is it like an hourly thing, or is it a?
No, I'm typically on a retainer style model with clients. So I, have clients I've worked with for 6 months, a year, and years even. And for that, I cover their events, I evangelize, I talk about their business, and I engage with them on social media. So it's this idea of an influencer. I bring a pretty big audience that is relevant to what they're doing, and they have access to my audience in turn.
And are you trying to curate that audience continuously every day, or?
Yeah, too much. So I'm you see my feed. I'm pretty obsessive. I'm a bit of a junkie when it comes to curating news, sharing industry news, industry insights, my clients' information. So I try to be kind of the most interesting destination for what's happening in my industry. So, and that attracts not only, journalists, analysts, other influencers, customers, partners, pretty much the audience that they're looking for too.
And are you focused on a single industry or a single segment?
Yeah, I tend to focus on enterprise B2B tech, so enterprise IT and cloud and
that's
AI
pretty big,
and IoT and mobility, all these the things that are on top of mind with enterprise IT leaders today. So it's a pretty broad, diverse range of technologies and topics.
And do you create your own content as well, or?
I do, and I do a fair amount of content creation. We're creating content now, right? So a podcast is a perfect example.
Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, it's funny that the content creation, people get really hung up on what's content, and feel they don't have the ability to create content. But content can be pretty lightweight. It can be pictures and images. It can be 140, 280 characters. It can be quotes and insights. Very, very stuff that's very easy to put together. And so, I'm doing that on a continual basis.
Yeah, and I think I find it like once you get the ball moving, it just flows.
Yeah, I think, and you get better at it over time. I mean, people obsess with a blog post, but I think like anything, if you practice and do it again and again, it becomes easier and easier. So, the best, most successful practitioners out there are the ones who practice. Right, they're continually trying and sometimes failing, but they're always learning in the process. And so when it comes to any of these new digital social technologies, whether it's podcasting or blogging or videography or vlogging, the key is just to get out there and do it and experiment and learn in the process.
Yeah. And where do you sit on the, make it pretty and perfect versus just get it out there?
I'm really more on the get it out there side.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there is something to say for, genuine, human to human conversation. And people are willing to overlook the lack of polish these days because there's so much noise out there. It's really about what you're saying versus the polish. And there's plenty of polished, perfect content out there as well. So I think just do it. That's the motto.
Yeah, because I'm finding, and maybe it just is what I do, is that people just want value quickly. They don't want the overproduced intro and outro, and they may find it entertaining or hypnotic, but a lot of people fast forward through it.
Yeah, and I think it's also, contextually relevant. I mean, if you're doing a long form YouTube video, there might be value in polish and production value. But if it's short form content, everyone's doing this now with their smartphones. You have a production studio in your pocket.
Yeah.
So there are plenty of tools that help make it easy. And so it's just a matter of experimenting with those tools and engaging your audience's reaction. And so that's most important, is what your audience is thinking.
And what coaching do you give people who say, I don't have time for this social thing?
Well, for my clients, if they don't have time, their competitors do.
Yeah.
And so it's very much a question of it's a competitive weapon. And whether you're a B2B seller or you're in the consumer space, digital is flattening the playing field. And it means that everyone can now compete on this level playing field based on their skills.
Right.
And so if they're not skilled and if they're not proficient in these tools and techniques and tactics, their competitors will be. And so it's very much this hyper-competitive landscape. And so a competitive edge on social and digital is an important weapon now.
And I also feel it has like a compounding effect. And I think that so many salespeople overlook this and don't think about compounding. They think about, starting each day like it was Groundhog Day and not get the benefit of the previous 5-10 years of experience. You don't get that with the phone.
Right. And there's patience that's required. I mean, Gary Vaynerchuk is one of my sort of personal heroes and mentors, if you will. And he talks about the value of patience. If you're going to do a podcast series, you don't put 3 out and expect immediate results. You do it week in, week out, year in, year out for a decade to build a big audience. And social is the same. I mean, I've been tweeting and posting for 10 years. And so only now I have the audience that I have. So if you play the long game, as in sales, as everything else in life, you can be successful, but you can't view it as a trick or a short-term tactic.
Yeah, I think you have to look at it as your network. Because before social, and I still have them, I still have these shoe boxes full of business cards and sign-in sheets and, a stack of notebooks going back, more years than most people have been alive.
Wow.
Not that I've opened any of them, but
yeah, you may want to put those on the fire. That may be time, Brian. You may want to give those up.
Well, I look at them and I go, well, that's 3 months of my life right there. I can't get rid of it. But I look at social that way. I look at the audience that way, in that I built it, but it's dynamic. It's an asset.
Right, and it's yours. So, these days job security and mergers and acquisitions and change is par for the course. It seems like reps are changing jobs every couple of years now. But guess what? I mean, your audience, your network goes with you.
Yeah.
And so it's really important to build that network and audience.
And that is something I am never surprised. I talk to reps leaving jobs all the time. And I go, do you have much of a LinkedIn following? I was on there a month ago. And do you have your own CRM? No, I don't even have my own PC or Mac. Everything's gone. They scrape it as soon as I leave. And the one thing, even going back, the first time they gave out PCs, I remember a coworker buying his own. And I go, why are you buying your own? He goes, well, I'm not going to be here forever. And when I leave, I want everything on this with me.
Yeah, that's a great point, and the same applies to digital and social. It's not just a Rolodex anymore. It's about an audience, and it's about a following.
That's it,
and that can stay with you over a lifetime. And there are multiple ways to monetize that. It's not just selling a product or service now.
It's not.
And so I'd encourage everyone to think about not just their job and what they do, but there's a side hustle, a business that they can run in the background that's interesting and personal to them. And I think that's what I did, and I found it invaluable over time.
And I think it's kind of like that savings account that people say, I'm never going to retire or anything, but someday you're going to want some time off. You're going to buy a house. You're going to want a nice car, a summer house. And when you do, you're going to want the money there. I think that's what your network is. And social, it really is your network now.
It's that, and it's increasingly being measured. Questions about your social network, your LinkedIn profile, are being asked at interviews. So, being able to show a body of work, in addition to your sales history and, attaining quota, is going to be an increasingly important part of the mix. And so from all these sides, it's an important thing to focus on and not neglect.
Now, what I've kind of come to the conclusion is figure out what's going to be hot 3 years from now and start doing it today, even if it's just 5-10 minutes a day. What do you think is going to be hot 3 years from now?
Well, I think a few things. I think along these content lines, video is going to be even more pervasive. And so having the ability to create video content on the fly, and be comfortable with the tools and the different techniques for video creation is going to be super important. The follow-up email is dying, right? Things
Thanks
like,
for meeting me today. Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of your sponsors with a co-video is a great solution for video follow-up. And so we're all going to be video chatting, creating videos, watching videos. So that's going to be an important part of what we do. And I think, messaging is going to be important, not just for customer service, customer care, but interacting with customers, following up with customers. Email is, as you say, is dying, but messaging is a great way to engage with customers. And so there's some amazing tools that allow you to build messaging lists and to keep in touch and support customers over messaging. So yeah, things like that. And new applications that drive community, I think are going to be pretty big. If you're familiar with meetups, I'd encourage every salesperson out there to join meetups, maybe manage or host a meetup. And these sort of micro communities, whether they're in person or on digital, are going to be super important personally and professionally.
And, what I'm noticing, I'm not sure this is any eureka moment, is that when people do make that little investment in, putting themselves out there and thinking, the personal brand title has been overused, but somebody who's passionate about something, and they almost become the face of the company. I think the days of, I worked at big brand company, I don't think anyone's going to care in 3 years.
Yeah, I think that's the case. We've talked about personal branding. It's become almost a little passé, but it is true. It's putting yourself out there and being seen and heard. by not just customers, but other, potential employers and the industry, folks in your industry, and, building your reputation through these digital channels.
Yeah, because the word of mouth is always going to be the most valuable marketing, and the mouth is moving from in person to the phone now to social.
Yeah, it is, and it's interesting you mentioned that, because everyone talks about the value of their network and their Rolodex, and salespeople love to talk about the folks they have these relationships with. But I find the power of weak connections is as strong as the quote unquote strong connections. So people who you sort of know, maybe you've connected on LinkedIn or follow you on Twitter, but really don't have a personal relationship. I've had so many opportunities come through these quote unquote weak connections that have turned into great opportunity versus just my intimate, few hundred people that I know personally. So you can't overlook the power of the network, the social network, in building relationships, even if they're not necessarily obvious to start.
And that's it. And if you become kind of the face for a particular problem, solution, issue, when somebody wants to hire somebody to be that salesperson, that leader, to solve that particular problem or sell that solution, if you're the name that comes up, all the interview process is pretty much over.
Yeah. I hope never to have to interview again. But having looked at the hiring process, it's pretty dreadful. And what a way to distinguish yourself in terms of a digital footprint. That's really, really interesting.
That's it. And because you're kind of building it up, post by post over the years, and become known for that. And I think people overestimate how much work it is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't suggest people do what I do, which is spend hours and hours in their timelines a day. So I think, frankly, for your average sales rep, 15 or 20 minutes a day is more than enough to schedule, to post, to do some engagement, and get value again over time. Is the key point.
Right.
But what about you, Brian? What about your podcast? It's how's it doing, and what is your goal over time with the podcast?
Well, I had started this coming up. It'll be 10 years in August. I, like you, wanted to get out of the rat race. My issue was that I was having to work for people who have less experience than me.
Right.
And that became both frustrating, and at the same time, this is now 10 years ago, the CRM became the focus of sales versus the revenue. Everyone wanted the revenue, but until the revenue was there, all they did was look at the dashboard.
Oh, I hated that.
well, I was like, this is adding no value, because as soon as I put it in, they call me and interrogate me about it.
Right.
And so I knew that game, and so I go, and I was doing really well. I had enough money in the bank, and so I go, why don't I write a book? I've always wanted to teach my method of selling, which was more on the process and the strategy versus, exactly what to say or how to say it. I always found that trying to change someone's personality was too complex. So I started YouTube, got a little traction there. Even the podcast didn't have much traction. It was, right as the iPhone was being introduced. So they had less than 1% of the market. Tried a blog. I was always active on LinkedIn from the day I started. Loved LinkedIn and the capability. But about 4 years ago, the podcast started blowing up. And all of a sudden I go, well, now I don't have to fly back and forth from, Silicon Valley to DC. I had houses in both places. 6'4", and I'm mostly legs, and I can't afford first class. So it's kind of a torturous, 5.5, 6 hour flight for me. And I was like, why can't I go 100% digital, where I can just talk to reps, talk to people who want to learn how to sell, want to crush their number, without having to do those 2-day workshops and stand up for 2 days and try and keep everybody excited, including me. So digital, I saw the potential. I saw no one being successful at it in the B2B sales thing, but it's blown up. It really has.
And it's been great as a listener to get so many insights and tactics, and even someone who, like myself, who spent 25 years in sales and has been through every, Miller Hyman sales course I can imagine, and more, and to actually still be learning about selling and sales tactics and techniques has been phenomenal. I really thought, until I started listening, I knew everything there was to know about sales and selling, but it's really not the case. I mean, there's just so much to learn, and it's such an evolving space, and the human psychology behind it is just so vast that it's been really great to listen to the show.
And that's it. I always use the analogy. It's like you never hear a doctor pretend they know it all, or a lawyer pretend they know it all. They do just the opposite, right? They go to conferences. They listen to each other. They're asking themselves, what do I not know? And
yeah, that's a great point. I think we were in an odd place in sales where there's obviously new generation coming up.
Well,
and there isn't, a lot of the training and enablement that people like you and me had over the years. I mean, people are kind of being thrown into professions without much support. Yeah. So folks are having to go find and sources to educate themselves.
And that's it. I don't know if you ever looked at the Dunning-Kruger graph.
I have not, and it sounds like a Dunkin' Donut or something. It
does sound delicious, doesn't it?
Yeah, but tell me, what is that?
It shows the level of confidence and curiosity that people have as they become more and more experienced. And what happens is it peaks about like a year and a half, 2 years after someone's had some success. They kind of reach the peak of it where they're so overconfident compared to their ability. And I call it kind of the know-it-all trap or the B-player trap. And so they stop looking and learning, and then all of a sudden it goes way down because they're overconfident and start blaming everybody but themselves. And then it swoops back up, and that's when people figure out, oh, I don't know it all. I really have to become a journey person and stay open-minded and learn. I mean, because I've got to read, 10, 20 sales-oriented books a year. I listen to, as many podcasts as I can, and you're always learning. And you just can never get to the point because we're dealing with people. Imagine a therapist just walking somebody through a process and at the end going, "You're cured."
Right, right. That's a great point. And I think even for someone like myself, as a sole proprietor, I've really had to up my sales game in a new way. It's one thing sitting behind a desk at a big company like an Oracle and kind of being successful. But when you're out there alone, the phone's not ringing.
No.
There is no inbound. There are no leads. You really have to go out and hustle. And I had to up my game in that regard. And I'd encourage people to strike out on their own, only if they're ready for that sales journey and to sell themselves. And I think a lot of people fail because they have tons of great background and knowledge and content, but they're not able to go out and sell. And so it's a fundamental skill.
Yes. Hey, this has been a great conversation. Where can people go to follow you and learn more about your work?
Yeah, really, let's engage on Twitter at Evan Kirstel and look forward to the feedback.
I hope that convinced you to spend a few minutes a day on building your little brand and whatever makes sense for you in your space. But don't think about what it is today. Think about what it's going to be 3 years from now, because in 3 years, it's going to be very different. And that's when you're probably going to need to blow up your career. When you need your next job, the last time you want to have to do something is when you have to. What you want is your network there all the time. So when the time comes, you just pull on it. You call in some of the chips that you've put down over the years, the favors that you have given, that people know, like, and trust you already. If you don't do it, guess what? You get put into the application bin. And that's not how people hire. That's not how people buy. People do not buy through a fixed process. They buy through this random emotional process that few people understand. And to give you an update on the courses, what's really blowing up is that the community element is really happening, where people within the course are now helping each other out, including getting each other jobs. People who have completed the courses are shocked in that their customers want to hire them as their VP of sales. These are all great signs of people understanding how other people want to interact with each other. It's not about buying and selling. It's about connecting and helping each other. And when you get past that hurdle and you understand the process to do it and you work it a little bit, everything seems to come out so much easier. And then the people who in the complex sale course, now they understand why deals are getting stuck, why they feel like their clients are lying to them. They're not lying. It's just they don't know what they're doing. They're just lost. No one teaches them how to buy a product, how to change the way the company does business. So that's why I teach it, because I had to go through it myself. It took me a good 5 to 10 years to figure this all out. And most of the people I talk to of 25, 30 years into it still don't know. They're still going through the keyword stuff of solution and strategic and challenger and decision maker. Oh, shut up. You clearly don't know how it works. I mean, I heard this one guy on LinkedIn saying, you can't speed up a deal because what you need to do is just respond to the customer with value. Oh, thank you. That's not selling. That's servicing. Who needs you? Anybody can respond to a customer with value. Our job is to guide the customer through the process. And the simple assumption that we make that they know what they're doing, they don't. I've been doing this forever. And you get at the board level, you get to the CEO level, and they know how to write their name on the piece of paper, but they're so cautious about making mistakes. When the dollar amounts are big and they don't really have the business case in front of them, I show you how to prevent all that stuff from happening, because it's going to. Look at last quarter. Why didn't the deals close? Less than 50% of committed deals close. I say so much for commitment. Come on, it sounds like marriage. If you're committing a deal, that means you feel that you can close it. Why doesn't it close? There's a lot of reasons. The complex sale is called complex for a reason. Very few people understand it. The only people who really understand it are the people who have had to do it year after year after year and are emotionally attached to success. Not a bunch of sales trainers that couldn't make it as reps, got kicked out of marketing, gave up on selling this thing or that thing. The Austin Powers of selling out there, failed SDRs, failed other people. Cut it out. We've got to learn how to sell, how to work it. And the courses have 3 major components. There is the content. 100% of it's recorded and put into the course day 1. You get 100% access. You go through it the way you want, at the pace you want. You have a year-long access to both the courses individually. You can pay for them all at once and save some money, or put it on a monthly payment plan. It is not a membership, though, so make sure that you understand that, and you're going to commit yourself to get your game to the next level. If you want to talk to me about it before, just to validate I exist, and this isn't a 10-year-long strategy to take some money from you, I'd be happy to talk to you. My calendar is at b2brevenue.com. Go to the training tab. And just click it. You can find a 15-minute spot. I do ask that you've listened to at least 3 episodes of the podcast and you feel that what I'm talking about matches what you're selling. This is not door-to-door or retail sales. This is business-to-business sales, large, complex deals, reasonably large dollar amounts, multiple decision makers, and people involved in the decision. That's it. Also, check out the show notes for all our partners. Pipedrive, get 60 days free access to Pipedrive with Brutal Truth coupon code. Go check out Nudge and Gong.io, doing great research. Get your co-video rocking. Video email, I'm telling you, try it. Try it for 2 weeks. I can get 2 weeks free. Tell them you heard about it on the Brutal Truth. Give it a shot. Turn that camera on. I'm turning the camera on all the time now. I'm doing the Zoom thing, got to put on a nice shirt and you're ready to rock. That's it. I'll see you next time. If you see my stuff on LinkedIn, give it a little thumbs up, a little comment, a little share would be greatly appreciated. I'm running out of connections, so just follow me on LinkedIn. Don't feel rejected. I got to delete some of the old connections that I don't know anybody anymore. So I'm trying to clean that up. Also, check out the other 2 podcasts, Sales Questions, Brutally Honest Answers, and the B2B Revenue Leadership Show. We'll see you next time.